Hello, my name is John Horgan. I teach at Stevens Institute of Technology. I'm also a science writer, and I am carrying out conversations with some of my colleagues at Stevens in the College of Arts and Letters. These are people who teach humanities, social sciences, art, and music, just to help people outside of Stevens know who we are. And so today is one of my colleagues and friends at Stevens, Professor Joyce Mullan, a philosopher. So good to see you, Joyce.
To see you too.
All right, so my first question is, what made you decide to become a philosopher in the first place?
Well, like maybe a lot of people, it was a convoluted route. I started college as an anthropology major, and I really liked that. But then I took a course in anthropological theory, and I loved it. And then I transferred to another school, and I had kind of a life-changing experience. I took a course in modern political theory, and I walk into a dark auditorium. That's where my teacher was assigned. And one of the first things he said is the 20th century is one of the worst centuries in the history of the human race. And I was so astonished. You know, I was taking classes in California. It was a beautiful sunny day, and it was like a bomb dropped on me. And of course, he was talking about the Holocaust and totalitarianism. And so I majored in political theory in college, and I liked it very much, particularly some courses. I mean, I did well in modern political theory, but I also really like classes in ancient Greek political theory, and some issues were bothering me for a long time. So when I went to grad school, I was still in political theory, but I went to the new school, and at that time, the theorists I didn't find too exciting. So I started sitting in on philosophy classes with a guy who was a Heidegger scholar, and Hannah Arendt, the famous philosopher and political theorist. He was the last person she hired. She died of a heart attack about 6 months later. And I was so mesmerized by Rainer Schermann's classes. Before this, I had taken several courses in philosophy in college, but none of them I found all that exciting. And also in political theory, my teachers were very critical of Plato, his critique of democracy, his view of philosophy as, you know, I've got the truth with a capital T, and all you people are misguided. I was just teaching Plato's theory in the Republic in my Theory of Human Nature class. But my teacher taught me that philosophy needn't be totalitarian. It could be something else.
I'm not sure I ever knew about the connection between your interest in philosophy and your interest in political theory. I think some people have a view of philosophy as being sort of disconnected from the real world, whatever that is. It's the ultimate ivory tower discipline. But it sounds as though you're interested in philosophy as it connects to politics and other real world issues that are extremely important. Is that the case? Do you still feel that way about philosophy?
Yes, and in fact, today I was talking with my students about Hannah Arendt's hero was Socrates, and he was somebody who was used to making up his own mind, not following the crowd. And when she was on the trial for Adolf Eichmann and watching him just repeat all these cliches, and she came to the conclusion that he didn't know how to think for himself. He he followed the crowd, and only people who were in the habit of making up their own mind could be counted on when the chips were down, is the way she put it. You know, they were the ones who didn't follow the crowd, who didn't unthinkingly, turn on their friends. And so, yeah, definitely. The other important thing is when I took a lot of social science classes, they were always interested in what are the outside sources, either biological or sociological or psychological, that make you who you are. But political theory is about the realm of freedom. You know, is there a space of human freedom where humans can determine who they are? And yes, we're determined by our hormones and our society and history, but we can do things differently. So I'm watching the funeral service for Ruth Bader Ginsburg this morning, and I was in tears because she just was determined not to, you know, be what everyone expected her to be. And she paved the way, especially for women, to be something else and to contribute.
I think in a way you've already answered my next question, which was going to be, to what extent are you influenced in your teaching or your research by current events?
Well, I am, sure. A lot of my own research has been in ancient Greek political theory, but what I look at is how are they still speaking to us? I do think that the past can speak to us, not completely. Thankfully, we don't believe in slavery anymore. Or, and I had a woman student ask, you know, what did they think about women? And you don't want to hear what they thought about women in ancient Greece. But, you know, power politics, ruling versus being ruled, demagogues, you know, many of the things that the ancient Greeks were dealing with are still issues we're grappling with to this very day, definitely. But I also have an interest in philosophy and science fiction because science fiction always asks, what if, you know?
Mhm.
So that interests me too.
You also are involved in the pre-law program at Stevens. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Certainly. Many of the students that go to Stevens do want to go on to law school, and so a pre-law minor can be very useful for them if they want to go on to law school. But even if they don't want to go on to law school, a pre-law minor can look very good on their resume, because often law-related classes, you know, if they want to be an engineer, they have to know about civil law. If they want to be a mechanical engineer, they may want to know about patents. So a pre-law minor or in law-related classes can be very useful no matter what your major is. And I'm also the faculty coordinator of the Stevens Law Society. And we do have many events. We have a partnership with Seton Hall Law School, and we often invite their faculty to come and give talks, especially their faculty that specialize in technology in the law or public health in the law.
One final question. To what extent do you think, so you know, we're going through a very stressful time right now. You and I are speaking in the middle of the pandemic that struck the US and the world. There are protests about racism and law enforcement across the United States. We're facing an election that is creating extreme polarization in our country. So a lot of people are really stressed out right now, including myself. So to what extent can philosophy provide, I don't know, comfort or perspective or consolation in a time like this?
So for one thing, I'm also teaching philosophy of law, and some of the political issues that you mentioned, like the Black Lives Matter movement and the upcoming election, and also the recent death of Justice Ginsburg, we talked about yesterday in class. But also in regard to how philosophy can help. there is a certain branch of philosophy, the Stoics, that their entire purpose was to be therapeutic. They came about in a time in history, a very volatile period. And they began, to ask, what is the best way to live? Is the best way to live sex, drugs, and rock and roll, eating as much as you can, drinking as much as you can? Or are there better ways to live? And they also talked about, what you should let affect you and what you shouldn't let affect you. And it's ironic that you just asked that question, because a couple of months ago, I woke up one morning and hearing dreadful news. It was around the end of April. And I thought to myself, it's getting very hard to keep body and soul together. And then as a philosopher, I kind of jerked back, and philosophers don't talk about the soul anymore. They just talk about the mind. But talking about the mind cannot really capture how anxious we're feeling. And that maybe talking about the soul, even though modern philosophy, they shy away from, such spiritual ways of referring to the human person as having a soul, but maybe the language of the soul can speak to our times. And, we need purpose in life. We need work. We need meaningful work. And philosophy, yes, philosophy has been asking questions. As Peter Singer said, philosophy has been thinking about many issues with civil disobedience, with why are we here? And they've been thinking about these things for centuries.
Thanks, Joyce. You've reminded me of why I love philosophy and often turn to it and find myself talking to philosophers and writing about it. And I think it is those issues that you just mentioned that make it so enduring. It's why we're still reading and talking about Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and others thousands of years later. Anyway, thanks, Joyce. And I hope to see you in the real world back on campus before too long.